Okay, so this is going to be a big one. So prepare to go down the rabbit hole on this one. This is a humongous vision. And I want to preface it by saying that normally I talk about futurism. However, what I'm going to share with you now, it may seem futuristic. However, it's ready now. This technology and this blueprint is already here, and it has already been stood up as a proof of concept at its very base layer as a platform. But it's important to understand what this technology is going to become in future, so that we can plan ahead and imbue grace into the system, so that as it's ushered in, the disruption, it should be seamless. It should be seamless. It's profoundly innovative, and it's going to catapult us forward in many, many different aspects of civilization. But it's important to understand that, if something is leapfrogged, if some form of technology is leapfrogged, if some industry is leapfrogged, there are people actively working on projects in that space that is being superseded, who still have valid technology that can become part of this. But what we want in an ideal scenario is to identify what that is, so we can absorb and assimilate it into this new platform and carry it forward. So this is about the nature of a borderless nation, or what's called a network state. But I am going to share with you an example of this that is coming through now, and I'm going to talk through what the implications of this are. Because at the moment we've got a scenario within which it seems as though there are governments. So we have centralized authorities who are carrying the burden of the collective body of the people prospering. The collective will of the people empowers the governing body to enact their will, and agencies are engaged to fulfill that will through enactments. So this is a centralized authority, a centralized agency, and the centralized agencies then delegate that agency out to other agencies. So the agency does become distributed, but often only with other government agencies. So this is a common structure, part of a structure I'm involved with Callaghan Innovation. And so the authority that we have, the agency that we have, is delegated to us, and so we are the agents to enact, to fulfill the will. Basically, that's delegated to us through an enactment. That enactment is constituted to represent the will of the people, and that the will of the people is entrusted to those who we elect to represent us, to represent our collective will, and we vote for that. So it's important to understand there is a hive mind process that harvests the collective will of we the people, and through the elections we delegate the authority to enact our will, and enactments happen, and then the agency to fulfill the will is delegated. That's how it works right now. So as much as as any human being wants to say, oh, the government this and oh, the government that, understand that we've made it this way. We are the ones who've willed it into being. And so it's very important to understand, if you are of the nature that believes that it is government's duty to protect and to XYZ ABC, then you're imbuing that centralized authority with that agency, even through the intention, even through speaking it, posting it on LinkedIn, posting it on Facebook. That's what you're saying that you want. You want someone else to take on responsibility for that. And so if that centralized agency, if you want that centralized agency to take responsibility for that, then you're giving it the power to intervene. You're saying you want it to intervene in your life. However, most of us, or most people that I know, when they're speaking of the government, they are also saying they don't want the government to intervene. Now, you can't have both. You can't have a centralized authority that you're imbuing with the authority to intervene in your affairs, in the affairs of the state, the nation state, and then to say that you don't want it to interfere. You can't have both. You can't have both. However, we do need scenarios within which we can have both. So you see, and this is the hypothesis that I really, I'm vested in wholly, and that is, it's a hybrid of both. Centralized distributed authority, or you may want to call it consolidated distributed authority, consolidated delegated authority. And I often use the example of someone who is completely disabled and they can't even speak, but they can blink. Now, they have the ability to share their will, but they need to delegate the agency to enact their will. All of it. The duty of their care, they have to be able to delegate that. They need to be able to delegate the duty of their care to a trusted third party. Has to happen. So we need the mechanism of delegated agency and delegated authority. But what remains sovereign for that human being who is disabled, their will. It's immutable. It's immutable. You can't take that from them. You can't take that from them. And as long as they have the power to share their intent and to express their will, it is my will that A, B, C, D, E, F, to delegate the agency for A, B, C, D, E, F to X, Y, Z trusted party, so that I can thrive in these areas of my life, so that I can write a book one day, through blinking to someone who can translate it, so that I can create a legacy, so that I can find meaning in the world, but their interpretation of what matters, meaning is all that matters. And so expressing your will is not enough. Expressing your will is not enough. It is my will that ABC. Okay. That's it. But the so that is how you can find meaning in your life. It is my will that ABC, so that DEF. And the so that means that you can delegate the authority, and that the enactment of your will is in alignment with what it means, with what meaning means to you. And so, a lot of us think that we compare the ideal scenario that we envisage in our minds. We often compare it to the Constitution of the United States, where the rights are unalienable, but the rights are to live. I think it is to pursue happiness, something along those lines. The pursuit of happiness. But it's happiness. That's missing the mark. It's meaning. Because a fulfilling life, the meaning of that to me is much different than it is to you. The pursuit of meaning for me is very, very different to you. And the next person, and the next person, and the next person. And so that is what we need to protect and preserve, is the meaning, the interpretation of our will. So in that scenario, this is really where we want to get. And the reason I'm conveying this to you first is because in a borderless nation or a network state, I'm going to call it a borderless nation for the purposes of this podcast, because it makes more sense to a human being, and it's more inclusive than it is a network state, which is kind of it's kind of a Web3 blockchain kind of thing. However, like with all forms of technology, eventually we're going to push the technology into the background until it's invisible, so that it doesn't matter. So once we understand these fundamentals, we come to the realization that yes, we need centralized authority. We need trusted third parties. We need the capability and the capacity for a human being to delegate the agency. And sometimes they may, depending on how incapacitated they are, they may need to delegate the authority to interpret their will, to interpret the meaning of their will. But if they can interpret the meaning of their will themselves, it is my will that ABC, so that DEF. The DEF means you're interpreting your own will. But if you were to say, it is my will that ABC, and I'm delegating the authority to interpret my will, ABC, to trusted third party, and trusted third party determines the so that. And we see that with human beings when they create a will. It is my will that ABC, DEF, ABC. And then they entrust the interpretation to a trusted third party, a lawyer, to interpret and enact the will. To interpret the will, but also delegate the agency to fulfill the will, as well as enact it. And so very fundamental, basic stuff. Once you separate out all these powers and these mechanisms for distributing authority, then you can then create a structure whereby the full gamut of possibilities are catered for. So on that end of the spectrum, you've got a completely disabled human being, almost wholly incapacitated, but because they can blink and therefore use Morse code to communicate, they do have the power to express their intent, to interpret the meaning, and to delegate agency. And now this is where, so I want to just go a step further than this, because if we can go a step further than this, then we can, those of you that know me, that I'm very staunch on nobody gets left behind. Nobody gets left behind. And it's one of the bugbears that I have with Web3 and blockchain, is that it's leaving most people behind. So it's not an all-encompassing solution, and everybody knows that. People are trying to solve the onboarding issues to solve that problem, and full credit. And this is kind of that's what's bringing us to this point now, where the technology that I'm going to talk about soon becomes relevant and is actually rising to the surface because of this pressing to solve the problems of onboarding, so that inclusivity is the default. So if we go a step further than someone who's completely disabled and who is in a wholly vegetative state, they cannot blink, move. So the power for them to delegate their agency, we know they don't have that. So do they have the power to enact their will? No. Do they have the power to interpret their will? No. And do they have the power to express their intent, to express their will? It is my will that. No, they don't. So what do we do in this scenario? What do we do? And this is the fundamental, this is the fulcrum of all progress that we need to make to build a civilization on top of. This is the kernel. This is the absolute fulcrum, fundamental principle that is the most important pillar of any civilization we build from this moment on. This is the fundamental, the crux of the matter. So what is the crux of the matter? That if this person is to live any kind of fulfilling life, then we have to intervene on their behalf. And so we have to make assumptions, you see? So we have to assume absolute power. We have to embody dictatorship. Understand this. Dictatorship is a valid aspect of civilization. It's a valid aspect of civilization, and this is why reality is mirroring to us that dictatorship exists. Now, we like to turn a blind eye. We're all fully aware of the nations on the planet who have varying degrees of dictatorship. We frown upon them for obvious reasons and valid reasons, of course. However, everything in nature is valid. Everything in nature is valid. And so in this scenario, we willfully deploy a dictatorship, but a benevolent dictatorship. Benevolent dictatorship. And so how do we apply this? So we look at the scenario and we say all of the powers we need to dictate, we need to dominate and control this human being wholly. Every aspect of its care needs to be the responsibility of a benevolent, trusted third party. And so we have to make assumptions. And so we look at the mechanism that we have now where we have the expression of intent, then, which is how we share our will. It is my will, that ABC. Then we have the interpretation of that will, which means that. And then we have the enactment of the will, and that is the fulfillment of the will. So imbued into this, the fundamental principle of the system, the de facto standard as it is now, is the assumption that meaning is the fundamental principle. That's the unified intent of purpose of every human being. That's the core pillar. And in truth, if we apply this at every level, spiritual level, mental level, scientific, logical, and even at an emotional level, meaning transcends all of these things. Because what meaning means to me it's different for everyone. So for me to live a life of meaning, it means that ABC. For you to live a life of meaning, it means that DEF. And so what is the thing that transcends everything, that is wholly ubiquitous? It's wholly ubiquitous. What is the dependency that we have on meaning being possible? So, and this is where what I'm posing is the fundamental principle upon which we can build a civilization, upon which we can set standards for the development of AI, that we can embody and embrace as the fundamental principle for civilization. And that is, from where they are now, our unified intent of purpose is to take them from where they are now, is to enable them to accomplish the mission of being capable of expressing their intent. It is my will to ABC so that X, Y, Z. That's how devoted we are as a civilization. That we're going to meet you where you are now, and we're going to put everything that we can into enabling you to accomplish that mission. And we're going to accomplish that mission together. A shared mission. And winning means to us that you've gained the agency to express your will. You see? And those of you that know me, or especially those that work with me, know that I'm very, very devoted to mission-led, mission-driven ways of developing a strategy. So I always break it down into what's the mission? What is the critical path? And it's always based on the accomplishment of a mission. And so this is ubiquitous. You can apply it to absolutely anyone. And so if you think about innovation, as innovators, what are we wholly devoted to? We're devoted to the accomplishment of a mission for every human being. Whether it's getting to Mars, whether it's getting to the moon, whether it's being able to express your will, to share your intent, then that's where we focus and direct innovation. And, there are a number of innovations I can think of right now that have the power to take someone who is in a vegetative state from where they are now, so we can meet them where they are now, and we can accomplish a shared mission for them to be able to express their intent, express their will. This is true empowerment. And I talk about this in a group that I'm a part of. It's kind of like a think tank. And I've talked recently about this opening and closing of opportunities. So when you have an infinite array of opportunities, there's no reason to make a choice. And so it can have the tendency to create inertia. And so nature's way is to constrain possibilities. So if you imagine the walls closing in, the opportunities are becoming less and less and less, the pressure is increasing more and more, less and less possibilities are available. Now, if inertia still exists, then nature constrains those possibilities until there's only one choice. You see? And then so they're left with one choice, and they're like, shit. So they make that choice, and then motion happens. So this is the nature of nature. And so in this scenario, we want to imbue this method. We need to constrain possibilities. We need to create pressure, and this is the beauty of time. And what a mission-led and mission-driven approach does is it takes something that's nebulous and makes it linear, and gives you the capability and the capacity to constrain it to time, so that you can actually accomplish that mission. So I want to, it's going to make sense why I've shared that to preface the next part of this podcast. So we're in agreement. As civilization, we're wholly vested in this as a blueprint for the new blueprint of civilization. So now I'm going to talk about technology and a network nation, or a borderless nation. So it's quite simple conceptually. If you consider that a country right now is constrained to a fixed point in space, so it's landlocked. So my country it's pinned to the land, and that's immutable. New Zealand, Australia is Australia, and if we are to New Zealand is an island, but if we want to increase our borders, if we want to grow, make our borders bigger, then we have to go and invade Australia, which is obviously never going to happen. There's no reason for us to do that. We're extremely, we're very rich in resource. However, we do have some kind of crippling dependencies that we formed out of a desire to, continually evolve and expand and become more, that kind of really do need to be unraveled. However, fundamentally, if we want to expand as a nation, then we have to grow our borders. We have to proliferate life within those borders, of course. But the nation of New Zealand is the land. We consider it to be the land. It's landlocked. So a borderless nation is basically a nation where the will of the people has been imbued into, let's say, a piece of technology. And we talk about a black box quite often. Now, a black box, there are a few different interpretations of this, so I'll share the interpretation I'm meaning. A black box is something that's got a bunch of technology inside it that no one can see, and that no one understands. So it could be an AI model, it could be a stack of technology, it could just be a bunch of data, could be structured data, could be unstructured data. But nonetheless, what's inside the black box is not visible to anybody other than the technology that's governing it. And so in that scenario, the technology exists now whereby it's so good that we can trust it. We can trust the black box with delegating our authority to it. So let's say I'm completely disabled, and let's say I've been on a mission. This human being's been working with, let's say, Callaghan Innovation, the innovation agency, to help them to express their will. Let's say they've accomplished that mission. So now they're blinking. They couldn't blink before. We've got an alternative to blinking whereby we've mapped their electromagnetic field and the fluctuations in the electromagnetic field. And we've figured out that they can use their emotions as an alternative to a sense of Morse code. We can map it. So they can communicate now. So now they can express their will, they can delegate their authority. And now they say that they don't trust human beings to interpret their will or to enact it. But they do trust a black box because it's a system, a piece of technology that is devoid of human intervention, that is wholly autonomous. So it's rendered humans obsolete as intermediaries. It's got an AI model in it, and that AI model is empowered as the spokesperson to speak on behalf of, or to express what's in the trusted black box. And so in that scenario, we've now got the ability for the disabled person to communicate We can capture the data in a structured or an unstructured way inside the black box, and we've empowered an unbiased language model to interpret the meaning of that data, you see. So now you've got a spokesperson on their behalf. So now this person can speak using their emotions. And it's unbiased because it's drawing from the information in the black box. That black box, we know it's not being tampered with. The data is unstructured. So even if a human being went in there, would it mean anything? And so now this person can utilize an avatar to communicate and empower them to speak on their behalf. And this is where technology is taking us. With a borderless nation, what a borderless nation basically means, we can develop a black box, a trusted black box. We can make it immutable. And this black box can contain the constitution of one human being, or multiple human beings, and it can have rules, and it can have an AI avatar that speaks on behalf of the unified intent of the human beings involved. If they want that, if they trust an AI avatar. Some people will have a human being as the spokesperson, you see, because they trust a human being more than they trust an AI avatar. But lots and lots of people would trust an unbiased piece of technology to speak on their behalf. You see? So this is the nature of a borderless nation, is the nation is borderless, truly borderless, because the black box contains the shared intent of the people. And that becomes the nation. So now I want to zoom out of that for 1 second. Zoom out of that and now let's assume the proliferation of the black boxes. So it's kind of like it's what I imagine in my mind. It's kind of like, imagine a fireworks display. And there's a rocket. The rocket shoots up into space. Then it explodes and proliferates. And so now you imagine that and the proliferation of the black boxes. It's kind of like it flowers. And so connected to those black boxes, you have avatars, human beings, combinations of both. And each black box is a nation unto itself. It's borderless because it's digital, but it's sovereign. So the only constraint to it becoming, a nation unto itself is the ability to transact and interact between human beings who are bonded, unified in intent by that trusted black box. And they can exchange without borders. So that technology exists right now. That technology exists right now. And it's emerging through New Zealand, in fact. There's a profound technology that is emerging through New Zealand. It is... I won't speak about it freely just yet because there are people who have entrusted me to be discreet, who are developing what I perceive as key components of it. But let's call it, for want of a better phrase, let's call it a borderless nation in a box. So, subscribe for a blueprint for a borderless nation. And you've got a borderless nation. But ultimately, it's the underlying stack that enables the borderless nation to exist and proliferate. That's profound. So in that scenario, you have all of these borderless nations, the nations unto themselves. They now have the power to interact with each other. Those interactions are verifiable, and therefore, and the verification is contained within its own tiny black box. We know that black box is trusted because it's immutable, and you have a trustless system. You have a wholly trustless system. Now, over time, when you interact with a human being, as long as you've got a mechanism whereby their risk profile, so they have a risk score attached to them, that fluctuates over time, so that a human being understands the potential risk of engaging with another avatar, if it's speaking on behalf of another human being or another human being, then you can determine for yourself whether it's the risk versus the reward of interacting with that human being. Now, in this scenario, the technology for this, it's ubiquitous, because you can have your own constitution, you can have your own economic structure, you can have your own rules, you can have your own laws. One person's laws and rules make sense to them. One nation, their laws and rules, their interpretation of what it means to be a nation, a borderless nation, is valid to them, and another nation's is valid to them. They can formulate their own economic structure. They can incentivize their own, we call it tokenomics in Web3, but their own economic system. Now, but the beauty of these borderless nations is that they can interact with the formal economy. They can interact with the formal economy. And the reason for this is because when you have a borderless, when you have a container, let's say you've delegated the authority to express your will, to express your intent to a piece of technology, and that piece of technology is under the stewardship of a trust or a foundation that is constituted in civil law or common law even, then all of those interactions, the expression of your will, the expression of your intent, it happens outside of statute. It happens outside of statute. So it's all based on the word. Your word is your bond. Your will stands above everything. So you have that as the base foundation of all of these interactions. And then the layer on top is empowered by the unified intent of the trusted black box. Or if you want to be a nation unto yourself, which every human being will be as well, of course, you can bond to the formal economy through you, through the agency that you have as a legal person, you see. So underneath the interaction or the expression of intent happens in common law or civil law. Let's say if the foundations are constituted in Switzerland, and then by expressing your will, you empower the agency to enact your will or to act on your behalf. You bond that to your legal person, and that's the legal entity represented by your driver's license, by your passport. But that can be revoked at any time. So you can give yourself the agency to carry forward your will if you have the capability to enact your will, to delegate your authority, to delegate your agency. Or if you're, disabled and you can express your will, then you can empower another agent to enact your will. A trusted third party, a trusted black box, another human being. And then that person operates in the formal economy as it is now, using fiat currency, using Web3, using, cryptocurrency or whatever you want. Now, this means that any contract or bond you have in the formal economy, it stands beneath your sovereignty. You see? It stands beneath it, not above. Now, the challenges we have is in the formal economy and in the formal legal system, we say things like, we create a contract and it says you have to sign to say that you understand. Well, that in legal terms, you're willingly choosing to stand under that contract. That's the reason that it exists, because by default, you actually stand above it. So it's important to understand these things, but ultimately, as long as you realize and you understand the power of your will and your intent, you can revoke that authority at will, without question. You just have to know that you actually have that power, rather than accidentally, assuming that you stand under it. But you can revoke that authority at any time. So it's just a matter of time before this information proliferates anyway, and it already is. Hence why nation states now exist and are proliferating behind the scenes. So in this scenario, it's very, very important now, because this technology exists, and this is part of the reason I'm with a government agency now, is because I am really concerned about the disruption of this technology. And I'll give you an example. So I'm working with a founder. They've developed a profound piece of technology. They've developed a native blockchain. This native blockchain is based on electricity. So they've built a solar array, so a piece of hardware that connects to Starlink for redundancy, but it harvests energy from the sun, stores that energy, and breaks the electricity down into units that can be measured. And those units are then used to back a native cryptocurrency. That's value is its reserves is a commodity, which is electricity. So if you bond these solar arrays together, these solar nodes, you obviously have a wireless grid, and you're creating a cryptocurrency that derives its value based on the price of electricity, which is, it's like creating a reserve currency out of thin air when you think about it, that has value. Now, because it's a layer 1 cryptocurrency, you can create layer 2 tokens that are backed by the base cryptocurrency, and you can fractionalize that base cryptocurrency to proliferate your token. But this is the reason that we really need to get more sophisticated with regulation and legislation, especially in New Zealand, is because in the context of this technology of a borderless nation, the proliferation of it will be so, it'll just be, it's kind of beyond viral. It's almost, it's like a deluge, because there are no barriers. You can't stop it. You can't regulate against it. So you can't keep people safe from that proliferation. You can't, it's too, it's not contained. There's nothing that can contain it. So this is really important, because this venture, they're in the process of a proof. Well, it's actually not proof of concept. They're going to have product market fit. They've already got proof of concept. They've got working versions of the hardware. The software platform works. They've got a marketplace where you can fractionalize commodities and exchange them on the exchange. And they're just about to finish their delivering product market fit with their alpha tester, who have graphite mines, and they have graphite in those mines. And that graphite, they've developed a process for de-risking this first and foremost, but also for fractionalizing the graphite in the mines, and then converting the fractionalized graphite into a digital asset, putting it on the marketplace where it can be traded. And they've got a business model whereby retail investors, which is like normal people, can purchase the fractionalized ownership in the graphite, and then there's a liquidity event down the track with a guaranteed yield once the mine has then leveraged the investment in those digital assets to mine the graphite. There's a liquidity event down the track where there's a guaranteed yield. So they're going through this right now, and why is this important? Because the reason this is important is because they've stood up and delivered product market fit for a blueprint and a method with the accompanying technology for fractionalizing landlocked commodities. Landlocked commodities. So I'm working with someone in South Africa right now, and they're the spokesperson for a consortium over there, who they collectively have 800 billion estimated tons of coal landlocked in the earth. Now, the value of that at today's prices is $98 trillion worth of coal. $98 trillion. So just think about that for a second. And so in New Zealand, we have a founder who's developed a blueprint and a method for de-risking that exact process, where you can fractionalize the coal in the earth, issue it onto the exchange. All this is already done. It's already built. And make the fractionalized ownership in the coal available to trade and exchange on the exchange without ever mining the coal. So when you consider that this is just one consortium who has commodities landlocked, one consortium, granted it's a ginormous consortium, how much other landlocked commodities are there whose value can be leveraged? Now, what this does, it creates a lever for the dormant value, for the dormant wealth that exists. Another example, in New Zealand, we have a lot of outstanding treaty claims, Treaty of Waitangi claims. They're taking forever to get wound up in court. They go on and on for years. Meanwhile, the iwi, the tribes, they have programs they want to execute, commercially viable social programs to empower their people, and they're just waiting, it's taking forever. Now, in a scenario like this, the iwi can fractionalize ownership in an outstanding claim. So you can constitute the entitlement to the payout. You can constitute it in law. You can fractionalize that entitlement. And then you can fractionalize them, issue them onto the exchange, and trade them, and create liquidity for iwi now, with a guaranteed liquidity event once the claim is finished and reconciled. But the shared risk of whether the claim is valid, there's a process for that. There's a process for de-risking it. There's a process for giving it a risk profile. So the people who invest in fractional ownership of that outstanding claim, they know the risk up front. But here's the thing. How many New Zealanders just want to have $100? They'll just buy a token because they want iwi to reconcile this. They want to bring unity between Pākehā and Māori and the Crown. This imaginary divide, it doesn't exist. All New Zealanders want to reconcile this. We want to bring that healing. We want to mend that rift. You know, $1,000, $5,000. I don't care whether the claim is valid. I want to bring healing, and I want to close that gap. I want to collapse the axis of time so we can come together in unity. You see? So understand the proliferation of dormant, locked value that comes from something like this. And now imagine that on a borderless nation network that is impervious to regulation. Now, this is part of my role. What I do at Callaghan Innovation is I'm very fortunate. I have a stand-up with all the regulators every 2 weeks. We talk about things, and their remit is do no harm. But the assumption built into the way they regulate is that it's not possible to operate outside regulation. But that is the challenge that we face now. Either this kind of technology is going to come through and proliferate on a trustless system that's founded in civil law and therefore is impervious to regulation. So the FMA have no power, government legislation has no power, and therefore we can't underwrite. We can't underwrite the transactions. We can't create a buffer or a safety net for people if harm is caused, like if a proper duty of care wasn't disclosed. And so someone, a vulnerable person didn't realize the risk of purchasing a treaty bond or the equivalent of. They lost all their money. Where's the compensation? So understand we need regulation. And I am of the mind, and trust me, a lot of people don't agree with me on this. They want to disrupt. I'm of the mind we have to come together willingly and willfully, understanding that the potential exists for this to proliferate with or without regulators. But then we come together willfully to sandbox this thing. Now, the liquidity it's going to unlock is profound. When you think of $98 trillion just from one consortium of landlocked coal. Now, all that liquidity is going to flow into New Zealand. This is a New Zealand venture. So now consider all of the rest of the dormant liquidity that can and will be unlocked. And these tokens are, they're backed by tangible value. So very important to understand. We have to do this together because $98 trillion of liquidity is going to totally debase the value of any currency. So whilst we see absolute abundance in front of us, there's profound consequences of diluting a currency to that degree. Profound. But if this is the thing, regulators have to understand this. This is why we have to come together now. The sandbox has to come now. Has to. Because this will happen with or without regulation. That is the reality. So, borderless nations, they're going to be a thing. Regulation, it's going to be a choice that's down to a human being in future. They will be able to choose to transact under the regulatory framework or outside it, understanding that they bear the risk of facilitating unregulated exchange. And here's the linchpin to all of this is that there is going to be an aspect of civilization moving forward where there are transactions that are happening anonymously and trustlessly. And for civilization to work in future, we have to come to understand and accept the reality that that level of privacy is an entitlement. It is an entitlement to a human being. It is an entitlement to a bank robber, to a thief. It is an entitlement to every single human being. And the platform has to be agnostic to that. It has to be agnostic to that. So we can see it, we can detect the problem, we can see that there's a black market. But we use that as to detect a symptom of something that has to happen out in the real world, not on the platform, you see. Because you cannot impinge upon that fundamental right to privacy. It is a right, and human beings know it. And we want it. This is why we need a trusted black box. This is why human beings will never be wholly trusted as intermediaries. That's why any system that is dependent upon a human intermediary cannot and never will be wholly trusted. Understand this. So, borderless nations, the implications are profound. In truth, the technology that is enabling this as we speak it's like the best way to think of it is it's like a nervous system. So it's the next evolution of AI. If you consider AI, if you consider a neural network, you consider the evolution of that where it's evolving into an oracle, whereby it can ingest 2D images or stacks of 2D images and videos, interpret that information, and act based on its interpretation of that information. So that's the evolution of vision. And we know this, that, if you cultivate a brain in a petri dish, the first thing that happens is it grows eyes. So the same thing's happening with artificial intelligence. It's evolving to create vision. And the next evolution of that is, of course, the nervous system. And we're seeing this now emerging out in New Zealand, is the capability of a nervous system that then distributes sovereignty to an individual cell, you see. And that's literally how this works. There is the nervous system is, the people developing this, they talk about it like it's mycelium with the earth, which is really, to my mind, that is the nervous system of the earth, is the mycelium. And so in that scenario, it's then distributing intelligence. It's distributing intelligence. And that's literally what it does. So you have a hive mind and you have sovereignty. You have both. The mycelium or the nervous system carries what's required, and it enables cells to emerge that are wholly sovereign. That are wholly sovereign and are literally a nation unto themselves. And however, they still are part of a singularity, of a hive mind. And so this is the evolution of this. And I can tell you right now, the evolution of this nervous system technology has the potential to interpret chemical reactions. And so, the big question is are machines going to be able to evolve to have emotions? And what I would say is, based on what I'm seeing, it seems inevitable to me now. In time. But it's very, very clear to me that we're coming into the elbow of a curve. And yeah, when the compounding impact of this technology kicks in, I don't think we will have ever seen such a rapid evolution and advancement of technology ever. So now is the time. How can we? How can we bring this technology through together? It is emerging in New Zealand. How can the founders of the key components of this platform come together to absorb and assimilate each other's tech with a unified intent of purpose? And how can we work with the regulatory system, the regulatory framework, so that we do no harm? So that it is all inclusive, but the solution works for everybody involved, and that the proliferation of this technology and of borderless nations happens in a way where harm is minimized, and that anything that is rendered obsolete because of this innovation, that the value still locked within those ventures that are in the process of becoming obsolete is captured, absorbed, and assimilated, so that there's no waste. And of course, that the legacies of the people who have built ventures or applied thinking to solving problems that are going to be superseded are valued and incorporated, and so that nothing is lost. That's my hope for this venture. And so, yeah, that's the nature of a borderless nation. This is the nature of technology and how it's evolving. This is the reality of how the law works. And so my hope is that you can see where your power is, where your sovereignty is. That if we're all mission aligned, and if we're all collaborating to help every human being to accomplish the next stage, the next mission, to help them to win, then that's really how we can align ourselves with cooperation and collaboration and a unified intent of purpose. So how can we? Okay, that's it for now for the nature of a borderless nation and or a network state. Talk soon.